When it comes to Iran, there's really two main threats the US, Israel, and their allies see. Them building nuclear weapons, and in the meantime, to deter the US or Israel from attacking, their massive ballistic missile force. But as I covered in a recent video, they are really just a single punch weapon. They're pretty capable and accurate, and they can deliver a powerful blow, but after that, they're gone. It's not a sustainable way to fight a war beyond the first day or two. So what about the other aspects of Iran's military? They do have a decent number of conventional weaponry, like tanks, at least on paper. Somewhere around 1,800 tanks total. But many of these are old, leftover US and British tanks from before the revolution. They have bought somewhat newer T-72s from Russia, and they become very adept at upgrading and keeping old tanks and military equipment from before the revolution operational. On top of that, they've tried to build their own brand new tank from the ground up. So instead of focusing on Iran's ballistic missiles yet again, we did a lot of research and looked at their tank production and capabilities, and whether they live up to the claims, specifically the Karrar. And speaking of research, it brings a perfect link to our sponsor, Incogni. Last month, I got a call from someone claiming to be from my bank. They knew my full name, my birth date, and even the car I recently bought. Not only that, but even the license plate. I mean, we all know you can get information online, but even the license plate? Fortunately, I could tell it was a scam. I mean, why would your bank be telling you your license plate numbers? But I was almost impressed on how much research they would have had to do for all that information. But it's actually not hard. The answer? Data brokers. These shadowy companies harvest your personal info, your address, habits, even your family details, and then sell it online to the highest bidder without you ever knowing. That includes everyone from scammers to even employers, landlords, or really anyone who's willing to pay a small fee. Thankfully, there's a solution. Incogni contacts these companies for you, demanding that they remove your data and handle any objections. And they'll continue repeating this process automatically so no new information pops up. So don't wait until your information is misused. Identity theft and harassment are just one click away. Instead, click on over and use my code, CABAL, or use the link in the description and get 60% off an annual plan. Take control of your privacy now. Sign up for Incogni today and keep your personal data where it belongs. With you. To start, a real quick overview of Iran and its tank force. Nearly every tank Iran has is of foreign design, and possibly all of them, but we'll get to that. They still have several hundred old M60s and Chieftains left over from before the revolution in 1979, as well as T-72s that they've acquired from different countries over the years, like those captured from Iraq or bought from Belarus with the collapse of the Soviet Union. They finally got a license from Russia to assemble T-72S tanks in Iran in the late 90s. And they just got other tanks from all over and kept them, like T-55s from Libya, which they greatly upgraded and called T-72Zs. Despite the name, they're certainly not T-72s, the T here referring to Type 72. All of these tanks today sport major upgrades and improvements, and Iran is shown to have a very capable industry and ability to do so. But being able to upgrade an existing tank or license production is a far cry from being able to build your own tank from scratch. You don't have full control over the technology and supply, you're limited by the original design, there's risks of embargoes or not being able to acquire more tanks or equipment, and only offers limited industrial growth and technological know-how. And this brings us up to the Karrar. Karrar is Iran's newest main battle tank, built to strengthen its armored forces. It's not entirely new from the ground up. Iran starts with a haul from a T-72S tank, which again is assembled under a deal from Russia. But the turret is a fresh design made by Iran itself. Iran has always been pushing to make their own military gear because of sanctions and embargoes that limit it from being able to buy from other countries. And the Karrar shows off Iran's growing ability to build serious weapons, using lessons learned from working with that T-72S. First, its fire control system got a big upgrade. Iran didn't just borrow the old system from the T-72S, it built its own modern version. They've been copying and improving fire control systems for years, like the one on their upgraded T-55 tanks. This new system makes Karrar much more accurate. Plus, the commander has a special remote weapon station with thermal imaging, which means they can spot targets even at night or through smoke, which really helps the gunner hit their mark. As for armor, its hull is made of multiple layers of steel with air gaps in between them. When an enemy round, like a fast-moving dart or APFSDS, or an explosive charge hits, these layers will mess it up. As the rod penetrates each high-hardness steel layer, the tip is deformed, and the preceding air gap allows two things. It allows the resistance on that tip to be reduced to zero, changing the tip's velocity compared to the rest of the rod that's still traveling through that steel layer. That'll create dramatically different pressures that can cause structural integrity failures, which will help deform the APFSDS rod. and 2, it gives a chance for that deformed tip to be defeated by the subsequent incoming angled plate, which will further deflect it, ricochet it, and defeating it. The turret is a new welded design, not the older cast type from the T-72S, but it's definitely inspired by the Russian T-90M. It likely uses reflective plates, layers of steel and rubber that bend and disrupt the jets from heat rounds, really cutting their power. What's more impressive is Iran also copied Russia's Relek explosive reactive armor and stuck it on the hull and turret. ERA explodes outward when hit, breaking up the incoming rounds. Relek is extra smart. It's a further evolution of Contact 5, utilizing 2 high-hardness flyer plates instead of 1, and it's more sensitive to impact, which allows for earlier detonation of the charge. This ultimately translates to more effective protection. It can reduce APFS-DS power by up to 50% and heat ATGMs by 90%, giving Karrar some substantial overall protection. Inside, the Karrar is packed with modern electronics. The commander gets a screen showing a GPS-style map, where friendly troops are, the enemy positions, all things that are super helpful for keeping track of the fight. The driver has cameras for both day and night vision, plus a display with information like speed, fuel, navigation directions, and so on. Now there's some debate about the Karrar's engine. The original T-72S V84 diesel engine only had 840 horsepower. Now you could say that was enough for the T-72S, but Karrar is a much heavier tank. Iran first said its engine had 1,200 horsepower, but a datasheet hints that it might only be 1,000. For a 51-ton tank, that's a big difference. Less power, especially for its weight, means it's going to be slower and less maneuverable. And finally, firepower. The main gun is a 125mm smoothbore cannon, probably the same type Russia uses. The ammo it fires isn't known. It's possibly of their own design, or an older Soviet-era APFS-DS called the 3BM42 Mango, and also an ATGM called Tundar, a copy of Russia's 9M119 Safir. The range of that is just 4 kilometers and only 700mm of penetration, which is quite limited. That's decent against older tanks, but might not do much, for example, against modern US tanks. Still, it's enough to worry Iran's regional neighbors if a war did break out. How many of these tanks Iran will ever build is a big mystery. They originally said 800 back in 2018. However, the pandemic delayed that. It also looks like Iran is having difficulty producing them. It seems like most nations are struggling to design and produce new tanks in the 21st century, like the US canceling the XM1202 back in 2009 after cost concerns, and Russia's T-14 Armata production being cut way back, to possibly even just being cancelled. So it's not just Iran. But really, all this is theoretical unless the US or allies plan a ground invasion of Iran, which is really the only 100% effective way to end any Iranian nuclear program, and that's extremely unlikely. Iran's location and geography mostly rule any chance of that out. To the east is Pakistan and Afghanistan, not places the US could deploy forces and use as a staging area for a ground war. The same to the north. Then to the south is the Persian Gulf, which would mean a massive amphibious landing, something that would be extremely risky to say the least. Not to mention the countries that host US bases there would likely object to allowing it, as they wouldn't want to be dragged into the war themselves. West is really the only true option, but almost certainly not an option in terms of geopolitics with Iraq though. But even if they did, the US would have to fight across a massive country, roughly 5 times the size of Iraq, and through rugged mountains all the way to Tehran. And this type of fighting is much more suited to smaller vehicles and infantry, teams that are hidden in the hills or bunkers dug into the mountains that can quickly ambush their enemies than giant tanks. And all this is reflected in Artesh, or Iran's conventional army's structure. It's virtually all infantry brigades, with just a few mechanized and armored ones. So it's clear Iran itself knows there isn't a huge need for armored brigades with the most advanced tanks. But that doesn't stop them from using things like Karrar for its propaganda value.